So, unfortunately, I did not get the chance to watch Dune Prophecy. This of course is a prequel to those two movies right now. I'm saying right now because we're supposed to be getting Dune Messiah, which will be the last Villeneuve, film, right, in this series, right? And
Right.
I think personally that they should stop with the movies at that point. But it's Warner, so even if this show here is successful enough to warrant, I don't know, a next season or another spin-off or something like that, I think that you'll find some way to just milk this whole Frank Herbert universe for what it is, right? But yeah,
Right,
Ricardo,
right,
take it
right.
away. Dune Prophecy, you mentioned, you actually covered the first two episodes before, but yeah, now that all six episodes are out, yeah, how was it? How did it play out?
Yeah, this was excellent. This it started off, in my opinion, it works. Like what it does, it took Brian Herbert's works and just kind of flash through that, and then kind of they build their own story in and around that conceit. And
Wait,
like, all right, this not bad.
Brian or Frank?
No, Brian. Brian is his son, and
Oh, okay,
Brian
okay.
wrote a bunch of prequels. He wrote the prequels. Now, a lot of people hate the prequels, right? A
Okay.
lot of people hate the prequels. No, I don't think the prequels that bad, but it's one of those things where, yeah, nobody asked for this, and it's not that interesting. But it have a handful of people who think it's interesting, and they into it. But one, he's not as good as a writer as his dad, and then two, the world building is not that interesting. But what Brian focused on is something called the Butlerian Jihad, which was mentioned in the Dune story. But he does have focus stories on Butlerian Jihad, early Harkonnen House stuff, and that's what this was about, right? It was just focusing on early Harkonnen House, long before they was on Gidi Prime. Uh, early like this Valia and her sister Tula, who's these two abilities who have the abilities to do these speech stuff and manipulate stuff with the magic, so they're capable of Bene Gesserit stuff, and then they connect to the early, basically the founder of the Bene Gesserits, right? Because this woman who fought in the war with the machines, she started up, and they had a whole thing. And what they do is that they take that kind of book from Brian Herbert and then build it onto the story, and then start their own story onto its own, which is roughly 10,000 years before the events of Dune as we understand it. But what it is basically a good version of The Acolyte. That's how I think about this show. A prequel that alludes to a lot of stuff that we already know, and let's do it better, right? Imagine if The Acolyte was good. That's what this is, right? They make that conceit really well. And they tell, in 6 episodes, we learn a bunch of backstory about Tula. Tula does something that is absolutely horrible, I think in episode 3, and it's great. But then the result of that comes fruition with reveal about a certain character. So Desmond Hart, which is, I forget the character name, but he was the main character in Raised by Wolves. Remember that great show? Uh, he was in this, and he was playing this mysterious character called Desmond Hart. And then why this really worked for me is they explain this dude, and it's a great reveal. It's completely shocking. It came out for me. It wasn't come out of nowhere, but like when they reveal it, it's great stuff. It puts together, and then they tell a big reveal involving him, but then they set up like you see the origins of the Sardaukar army. Like you know what that is? That's like the badass army that the emperor does do, but like is we call him Mark Strong character who something happens to him, well he does something, and it's a big shocking moment, and it's like, yeah, it makes sense, but we understand why it happened. And the daughter and the daughter and his son come together, and it's the usual Game of Thrones prequel stuff. It does the same thing like the Game of Thrones prequel, which is a smart template to pull from. Lord of the Rings does the same thing. There's a smart take. And they just do a smart take. And because I'm not super familiar with all this prequel stuff, I was just into it, and it was just good stuff. They make all the best and right allusions to something. And then another thing about it is that they explain something that make perfect sense in retrospect, which is, hey, how come they had this big advantage to do this back in the past? And they answer this. Like, already like little things like, hey, how come they were so smart, or how they solved this problem so quick? Basically, and I don't want to spoil it, but basically they cheat. Like that's what you need to do. Already, like everybody who was involved, all the real powerful players, effectively cheated. And by cheating, you have to know what that means in the world, because there's something that is incredibly illegal, not supposed to do it, and they did it, and that's how they get this big advantage. And it makes perfect sense. Like how they will at least get a good head start by doing this thing in whatever it is they want to do, and they address it, and it's good stuff. everybody comes together and really work. But the main character, Desmond Hart, and what they do with him and the reveal involving him is great. Like for me, that catch me off guard. Like that had me like, wait, when this happened? Oh, okay, and then good explanations, in my opinion. I dug the hell out of this. Rated, yeah, I give this like a 9 out of 10, probably like a 8. I know you got people who probably detractors of this, and it's one of those things that if you're not into it as it was, you probably won't be into it because it doesn't allude to Paul and because so much time is passed. But they make a lot of allusions. Again, just think of I let's look at this as a good version of the Acolyte. That's what I think about it, where the Acolyte allude to a bunch of stuff we know in Star Wars already, but like, oh, it happened before, but this is a failed version of this, and this is that piece of drama. Right, they kind of do that. In this, they make an allusion to a character, we know what it's supposed to be, and like, okay, if you know Dune, then this makes sense, and it's just really, really solid stuff. Yeah, I dug the hell out of this. 6 episodes, I recommend it. It's not waste your time. I recommend this. 9 out of 10. Good.
All right. So speaking of Dune Part 2, I'm going to use that to compare Squid Game Part 2 or Season 2, if you will, right? So
right.
let me
So
talk.
I didn't find time to watch this. And what happens that I was like, yeah, I heard it not nowhere near as good as the first one. So I'm not sure
All right.
if I was into it.
Yeah,
So
all right.
give me the skinny.
Okay, so to begin, let me go back now, just quickly, right? So 3 years ago, right, 2021, we were in year 2 of this whole COVID thing, right? And it was just a weird time as far as just like media and just like TV show output in particular, right? So like
Right.
2020 now, with Netflix putting out Tiger King, and that was like the show, well, what I mean, like the show that everybody was talking about, right? So, in 2021, it turned out to be Squid Game, right? In the sense that this was a show that came completely out of nowhere, right? It had a weird title to it, but there was something kind of fascinating about the title and the themes and what the subject matter was now. And then you see it play out now, and it's just so engrossing there. This kind of keeps you on your toes,
Yeah, a pretty gripping show, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, right? And I absolutely enjoyed this. This was one of my favorite shows of 2021, right? But I'll never forget people, finding the last moment of the finale to be kind of underwhelming, right? So just to remind you of what happened, right? So we have the protagonist, Seong Gi-hun, right? You just call him Seong for now, right? Yeah, him actually winning the prize money from this 6-day ordeal with, being a prisoner on this island and being forced to play these kids' games. But in the process, if you lose or if you fail or whatnot, yeah, you literally get gunned down by these masked soldiers, right? So it ends with him being the sole winner, right? And he returns home, he pays off his debts and whatnot. His mom dies, unfortunately, and it's just him trying to get his life back together, right? There's a moment where he's in the airport now and he's about to leave to go to visit his estranged wife and, their daughter, right? And he notices this guy, and this was how he got roped into this whole thing in the first place, right? Playing this particular game, it involves, throwing down this particular, I forget what material it is, right? But it's basically like these sort of envelope-like kind of things, right? You throw one, there's one on the ground and there's one in your hand, you throw it and it's supposed to hit and it flips, right? That's how you win. If it falls down and it doesn't move the one that's on the floor, you get slapped, right? And that's what the guy was doing. So he kept doing it, and then he eventually won. And then he got this card, right, which had the logo pretty much, which is a circle, a square, and a triangle, right? And it's like, oh, there's a number, call this number if you want to make more money. So that's how the journey began, right? So seeing that he went through all this ordeal now, he's in the airport and he's seeing somebody going through that same thing with the same guy who pretty much recruit him to be in this thing in the first place. He's like, nah, I had to put a stop to this. So he finds his old card now. He makes a call to what is basically the leader, the supposed leader of this whole organization, right? This whole operation here, and basically says, "Yo, I coming back for you. I gonna find out where you are. I'm gonna go on that island some way or the other, and I'm gonna find you." And it stops right there.
Yeah,
right?
and I think if I remember correctly, the implication was that Squid Games happening everywhere, not just
Right. So just to correct you on something, right? So the Squid Game itself is not the actual, like, I would say, series of events that take place on the island, right? It's not the full thing, right? It's the final game that Seong and this other guy, because it ended up being 2 survivors, right? But yeah, that's the last game that he had to play. It's just sort of like kids game. You play it on this you play it in a playground, and that's the vibe of it, right? But that was the last game that he had to play. It's just that with us and social media and pop culture, we just think Squid Game is a whole 6 day thing, right? Like,
Right,
for
right,
example, like The Running Man, for example, right? From that
right,
movie.
right, right, right.
And so it's that. So Squid Game is not the whole the entire thing. It's just one game in this series of games, right? But yeah, point is again that now two things. One, and never forget people. Yeah, just feeling iffy about the end. Like, you went through all this
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
and you're basically saying you want to go back, even if it's to
Because
seek revenge. Is like, no.
exactly, yeah. The big twist involved with the old man, which a lot of people kind of call was so
True.
cliche.
Yeah, I wouldn't like
Yeah,
when I rewatch. I was like, yeah, they was telegraphing it. They was telegraphing
yeah.
it.
The Telegraph. No, the rule of thumb, always the rule of thumb with Telegraph is when you don't actually see them dead. Like it's that. It's like the ultimate Telegraph.
Yes,
Like,
because the camera move away and
every
you just hear bullet, but like you don't see
exactly,
him get
exactly.
killed. Right?
You don't see him get killed. Once you don't see
Yeah,
him get killed, they always go. Same thing with like when you see something fall on them or they fall off a cliff. That's aside. It's almost
that's true.
like to keep it, like to keep it open,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So unless you see them dead, dead fine.
Right. And second thing before I ask you what you thought about the first season. Yeah, the second thing
Right,
was, yeah, season two. We really doing a season two, man.
right.
Okay. So
Well,
just
I
last
mean,
point I
I
make. Just
knew.
last point I make before we get to your thoughts, right? Because yes, the show was a sensation, right? We were
Yeah,
quoting it, we were talking about it. That red light, green light sequence is
right.
still one of the most memorable moments of that
Yeah,
season period. And yes, I
yeah,
rewatched it. I was like, yep, it still holds up, right?
yeah.
But it was again just going back to the times that how things were in 2021, right? Yes, it was the show that we were talking about. Even people who wouldn't care to watch a South Korean show watched it, right? But still, at the time was all right. Well, do we need a season two? And well, they
Right.
just basically say, yeah, well, sorry, you gain one, whether you love it or not, you gain one, right? So I'll
What
get
I
to that
thought,
in a
well,
bit.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. No, I knew they could have expanded on it because it still had potential for it, given that he have money now. And what I thought he was gonna do is just like systematically like go and sabotage the other games now. Because again, these games happening, I just assume these games happening all over the world in some way, shape, or form. And you could get into some kind of class consciousness something like that, right? That's why I thought it was gonna go. So I didn't think it was like, oh, it have no way to tell an ending. It's just when you make another sequel, you always fall for the trap that bigger is better, right? You just fall for that trap and the sequelitis, right? But I knew that they could have done a lot with it potentially, like given what was set up now. So it was like, oh, a Squid Game season two, not like a far fetched idea, in my opinion. That's how I felt about it.
okay, understood, right? So
Yeah,
about the second season, right, which is called Squid Game 2, right? That's what it's called, right? Which is a smart title when you really think about it, right? So yeah, our boy Seong, right? Decide here's what I going back against, I going back to that island. I'm gonna take down this entire operation. This is gonna bring everything down, right? So literally 3 years after the events of the first season, right?
right,
Seong still have a lot of cash, and boy, he is on some Sarah Connor shit trip because the man just
right,
preparing for
right,
basically for war trade. The man
right,
amassed this armory of guns. He hooked
right,
back
right,
up
right.
with the same guy with this gangster guy who he had owe a lot of money to and ropey boys in. Cause them is like hoods now. It's like, yo,
Yeah,
we gonna find these people, Jay. We gonna get we stuff on that island house and we gonna shut shit down. That's basically what happens, right? But then, if you remember, there was this character by the name of this cop by the name of Huang, right? Who in the first season
yeah,
was looking for his missing older brother, right? And then,
right.
well, the big twist in the first season was like, oh, the same mass
You're
leader of
right.
the group
Brothers
was him, right?
right.
Yeah,
He was
and
running police, right,
yeah,
right,
and
right.
he ended up shooting he ended up shooting Huang, sorry, in the shoulder, and he falls off a cliff. And
Right,
even
which is
then
a
and all too, he was like, oh well, he's not dead, right? Like because he just fall,
shot. Yeah,
you know.
listen, that another rule of thumb. When they get shoot in the shoulder, or they had us somewhere on the edge. No, but real movie
Yeah,
thing,
because the man fall
real
in the
nonsense.
water, it's not like he
And then
fall
of
on
course you had to
rocks,
fall
you
off
know
a
what I
cliff,
mean?
which
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. It's not like his
it's
body was on
killing,
rocks
it's
or
killing,
nothing.
it's killing real life. It's killing real life, right? But in
Yeah,
movie logic, no. Yeah, that be
it
your
in
life.
movie or film logic, no. Like, yeah, the character survives, right? So, because this captain of this small ship and finds found him, right? Washed ashore, stuff like that, right? So yeah, basically Huang's quest now is to find that island and find his older brother and investigate what's going on, right? So yeah, so Huang now Huang ends up like meeting Seong, right? Because they actually met a couple times, but then at the time in the first season, Huang was disguised as one of the sort of pink dressed soldiers and whatnot, so he was kind of investigating what's going on, right? So yeah, they eventually team up as like, all right, we're gonna somehow, one way or the other, Seong is gonna get onto the island, right? And through some circumstances, yes, he gets back onto the island. There's a new group of prisoners, and yeah, the games continue, right? And I'll stop there, right? So
Right.
here's the thing about this show, right? So just going into this, right? And I'm gonna bring up Dune 2. Well, I'm gonna use two sequels that we got this year as examples, right? And hopefully it should clarify what it is a scene, right? So I'll use Dune Part 2 and I'll use Joker Folia Duns as examples, right?
Right.
What this show could have done, right? And I actually admire the fact that it, like the people behind the scenes were smart enough to figure it out, right? Because you could tell, right, that the people that, for the second season here, right, the showrunners are like, here's what, right? People remember certain aspects of the show. You remember the red light, green light moment. You remember the games. You remember the deaths and all that kind of stuff. Do you remember how shocking they were back then, right? Now, they could have fallen into the temptation of saying, here's what. Since Seong going back into it now, let me just do it beat for beat for beat. Let me just do it all over again, right? And they kind of do that. They actually start off in that same way now, you know what I mean? I don't want to spoil anything, I don't want to spoil too much here, right? They actually start off like that, right? But I'll tell myself, wait, I know they up to something. I know the showrunners up to something, right? And yeah, they would just sort of flip it a little bit and say, oh, so you think we're going to do this? Actually, we're actually going to give you this, but then we're going to flip it on you. And then when you think, oh, it's going to go here, no, we're going to flip it on it. They just keep going like that, right? So it really feels like they was just tuning into not every, right? But like all the criticisms and all the reviews that came out of the show back in 2021 and onward and saying, oh, so your figure, the prisoners could have done X at this time, because it's a good thing for me that I recap the first season, right? Because while I still do enjoy that first season, it isn't a perfect show, right? And even the season here is not perfect neither, right? But even back then, I knew people was like poking logic holes, like, like this guy couldn't, why he do this for, and why he do this, and blah, 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 and all these kind of things, right?
Yeah.
But it feels like they watch all this, or they just sort of thought all this up beforehand and say, here's what, how we could continue the story without succumbing or being tempted by, let me just call it sequelitis or nostalgia beat or whatever it is, right? Because yeah, that's what they could have done, right? But they just said, here's what, we just gonna keep switching it up, but not in a desperate kind of way. We're gonna do it in such a way where the story progresses in a logical way, but you're still gonna get the stuff that you know and love from the first season, but we're just gonna amp things up a little bit more, and that's what they did, right? So, like Dune Part 2, this is not a show where you're being held by the hand and being told every single thing that happened in the last season. I would strongly recommend that you rewatch the first season, right? Because unless you like some diehard fan and you remember shit that you saw once back in 2021, nah, it's not gonna work. Like, I would say you had to rewatch the first season with fresh eyes, and then when you jump into this next one, you're like, oh, okay, I like how they progress this, how they update this, how they tweak this, how they do that, right? Because yes, I could tell like they just took little bits of notes from little criticisms and just tweak it a little bit, right? So characters make decisions that feel a little bit more logical now, right? But that's just because things are different now, right? And that's one thing I really I'm just gonna use you here one time, right? One thing I really love about this season here, Jed, is like, yes, it really does feel like a logical progression from what we got in the first season, right?
Okay.
It really does,
right? Good
right?
to hear. Yeah, good to hear. Right.
It feels fresh, but it's the same survival dystopian thing that you know and love from the first season, right? Yes, it's the same scenario, right? It's a whole bunch of people, 456 people to be precise, right? And it's so ironic now that, Seong, who was number 456 is the same number again, right? So yes, same amount of people, and they have to play the games, but there's always like these rules and regulations. And if it is that if you break a rule or if you don't succeed in time, yeah, you get gunned down, Dread, you know what I mean? So yeah, they keep that, right? But there are a few more games that they add to the table here, well, I would say one in particular, I don't want to say the name of it, right? That one was so intense, Dread, right? And it's just a simple premise. That's what I love about these games, right? It's simple, but it's just when it's execution time, Dread is like, oh shit, right? Because yes, it is literally, you either have to do X thing or else you die, right? And it just ramps things up even more, right? Another thing I love too, right? Going back to what people might think now, there will be people who will think, but if you had just done this in the middle of the season instead of just letting all the games play out, all they could have survived. They actually do that. They actually
Right.
have something that takes place. It's something that follows up from the last season. I don't want to say what it is, right? But all right. So slight spoiler. It involves and it is a rule that's enforced after the first game, right? Where pretty much you get a chance to vote to decide whether you want to stay and continue playing or leave, right? But it's a majority vote, right? So of course, is the I's who have it, right? Or in this case, it's the X's or the O's who have it, right? But what the show
Right.
does so well, Dre, they literally decide, here's what we're gonna just split this group of prisoners right down the middle, Dre. So you have X's and O's, right? And just a touch on just the visuals of this boy. They managed to somehow they just managed to outdo themselves with this, right? This like the cinematography in this boy is just stunning in my opinion, right? Especially the use of color, right? And then also kind of heightening the fact that yes, we always used to see pink, right? Especially with the interior shots and whatnot, right? And the,
Right,
the outfits that the soldiers have, right? Now we're gonna do it in such a way where you're gonna see more of it, right? But more in the sense that the X's are red and the O's are blue. And we're just gonna have this gray area, right? We're gonna have this gray area where it's pink, and you're gonna see a lot of that, visually throughout the show, and I thought it works, right?
Yeah.
Just the interior scenes and just how they do just the production design though is like just magnificent in my opinion, Jed. It just managed to top what they did in the last season, right? If you remember the first season, there was this one where you saw like these mazes of stairs. They just do that
Right,
again and they just expanded it, boy. And I just watched this like, is this
Yeah.
real, boy? Like, or is this like
That's one of the better.
VFX?
Yeah, I remember that being one of the better sequences.
Yeah. And dog, this slight spoiler, right? Squid Game so dread us. They actually do, slight spoiler, they actually do their own Netflix logo using a set piece from Squid Game. The first time I see it, like, oh, huss, all they come on, all they're showing off us, all they're all showing
Right.
off. Like when they see it, you're like, oh, huss, they're all showing off with this, right? But yeah, the production design was excellent in my opinion. Cinematography was great. I actually thought the music was great as well, right? You do get the familiar songs or whatnot. Like there's like three main themes, right? There's one that popped up in the first episode. This flute melody. It shows up later on in the episode in the season, right? But there's one that I think a lot of people was emulated that beep 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 beep, and they hear the ha 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 ha. I kind of butcher it now, right? But that particular
Right.
song that plays every time you see the soldiers, that's there, right? And then there's another one which I call the main theme of the show, right? You hear it ever so often in the first season, but they found a way to kind of incorporate it in different ways in this season here. So I thought it worked, right? And they added a few new songs to it as well, which I thought worked, right? So yes, outside of Seong and Huang, right? There's some more characters that pop up here. There's this guy, this rapper, this Gen Z rapper by the name of Thanos. He will be like a fan favorite because yes, he talk about, oh, I have rings like Thanos as well. So yeah, he's this kind of wannabe rapper as well too, and he get roped into the whole situation as well. He's mad at this crypto guy who, like, for some reason the crypto guy set him up with some coin that was supposed to make money.
Right, yeah,
It's real crypto shit now.
Yeah, it was pump and dump away it's called out here.
Yeah, I think that's the terminology that they use there, right? Yeah, so there's a
Yeah.
subplot involved in that, and there's this mother and son duo that really worked for me. There's actually a trans character that actually caught me by surprise though. I was like, okay, this actually works, right? There's a few Marines in it as well, right? And how they work them into the story without spoiling anything, I thought worked as well, right? But for me, what really made this season work though was again just kind of subverting people's expectations, right? Because again, they could have just gone the lazy route and says, I'd say, okay, we're just gonna do the same 6 games because it's 6 days, right? So we're gonna do the whole 6 games thing over again, and we're gonna see the same set pieces over again. And you think that's what they're gonna do because they start off with something at first, right? But then they say, no, 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 we're gonna do this, we're gonna flip this on here, we're gonna do a little bit something bit different, right? And what all led up to that final episode though, like literally had me on my toes, right? It was just so incredibly intense, right? So there's a few things for you before I get to read it, right? So for one thing, this is a show that will reward you if you are the patient type, because yes, it
Right.
is a slow burn of a show. You get some great character building moments and whatnot, right? But you just have to wait for the moments to play out, and then you'll get to the more intense moments, right? And yes, like the first season, it is incredibly violent, but not in a overly gratuitous kind of way. You could still watch it, but it wouldn't like disgust you or anything like that, right? Unless you just have a problem with just seeing characters being stabbed or gunned down. If you're not into that, then the show is not going to be for you, right? And yes, even the games themselves have violent, payoffs as well. But there's always, one thing what always makes the show work, right, is that it's not just done for the sake of just showing characters die, right? What the show is always exploring is, human nature, and especially the banality of evil, right? It's always
Yeah.
about, all right, why am I playing this, right? Or why, like in the case of the season, yeah, what I should vote us out of the island, right? I should vote us out of the games, right? But at the same time, a character will say, no, I want to stay in the games, right? Because look, it's kids' games, If I just really think about it, I could play this and survive it, But there's
Right.
always some kind of little twist or turn there, and then it's like, well, it kind of blows up in your face, you know what I mean? And
Right.
some characters will just see people gun down to death and still be like, no, I need to do this because look, it have some debt that I had to pay, or this or that, you know what I mean? So it's always the morality that's involved in everything, right? Even right down to how the soldiers react, and even right down to how the mask, leader. I'm not gonna say how he's roped into this, right? But he has a bigger role to play in this, right? That's all I'll say, right? You see how that whole morality thing plays out a lot in the season here, right? And again, it's just how they just keep twisting and subverting things, right? Progressing the story, not giving us what we got in the last season, even though it will feel familiar, right? A couple more things. Couple gripes. I felt like there were a couple of story beats that didn't really play out, like they just sort of
Right.
stop. And yeah, just get it out of the way. The reason being is we're gonna get a third season. And I found out just after the fact
Well, that was the
that,
last season, right?
well, I am hoping that it is the final season, right? Because,
Okay.
like Dune Messiah, I don't think this show could go past 3 seasons, right? I
Right.
think that
Right. Right.
this next one should kind of just wrap everything up, just kind of stitch everything together, and we could just move forward our lives. I really don't think
Right. Right.
the show could go beyond 3 seasons. I think that would be overkill in my opinion, right?
Right.
But yeah, I still felt like there were a couple of story arcs that still could have been wrapped up, though, because yeah, this stops off at a great cliffhanger, in my opinion.
Okay. Good.
But
Oh, good
still,
to hear. I'll give it a shot now.
it still, it just sort of undermined the couple of subplots that I mentioned before. It just involves a couple of characters who are roped into this situation. One is a soldier who works in the compound, and one involves Huang himself and him trying to find this operation and shut everything down. Right? I felt like they just sort of stopped both arcs because we need to focus on Seong and what he's going through. Right? And lastly, I could understand the criticism, even though I didn't read a lot of reviews for it, right? Weirdly enough, right? Like Boxing Day. I don't know how these men just do it, right? Somehow them men, them people like this watch it like from midnight, Christmas night, all the way down to like 7 a.m. or
Well,
whatever
I
it
think
is,
some
you
people
know.
and some people get early.
Probably, and they just probably wait for the day itself, and then they just drop the review itself.
Right.
Because yeah, I
Yeah.
saw reviews popping up like Boxing Day
Immediately.
afternoon, yeah, and I
Right.
just started the show, and there were like reviews are popping up now. So some people were praising the fact that they were doing things differently, right? Even while giving you the goods that you expect. But other people, and this is I know this could be the biggest criticism, and I totally understand, is unfortunately the novelty kind of worn off, and I totally understand. It makes sense because, again, think about where we were in 2021. We were looking for shows to watch, and this show just kind of pops up out of nowhere
Oh
and just
yeah,
took the world by storm.
I don't think COVID. Yeah, I don't think if COVID didn't happen, this show wouldn't have anywhere near as much as the impact it did.
That's true. Yeah. It would have just been something that you would have heard about by word of mouth, and then you're like,
Right.
oh, what's
And
this show, right?
we'd still watch it because like it's given our show now, but like I don't think it would be as big.
Yeah.
Same reason with Tiger King. Like I doubt Tiger King would be as big if people didn't have to stay inside.
That's true. But remember, there was a Tiger King movie. I think it was. I think so.
Follow up.
There was a follow up to two that.
Cared.
Yeah, I didn't care. I didn't bother to watch it.
Yeah,
so
and then I think it had a movie. Yeah, I think it had a movie they based on it with
Right, that's what's talking about the movie. Yeah, with Kate McKinnon.
Nobody. I don't think anybody watched that.
Yeah, because back in 2020, as I wrap things up, right? Back in 2020, that was the show. But afterwards, like, well,
exactly.
I seen the show, so I don't need to talk about it. And I can imagine a lot of people feel the same with Squid Game, right? The first season,
Right.
like you saw it in 2021, you talk about it, you share the beams, you probably had the beep, 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 beep song on your phone or whatever it is, or as a notification, but after that, like you just kind of forget about it, right? So yeah, I imagine that would have been a challenge for the showrunners to say, okay, well, how we could continue this show, even though a lot of people, unless they like real diehard fans or they really appreciate what we did with that first season, really care to see this, right? But I feel like they just made, the right decisions. They made really smart, truly smart calls, though, in terms of just updating, progressing the story while keeping the core teams and the formula and whatnot. So it's there, right? But yes, ultimately, I can understand some people watching this like, but yeah, it's still not like how we felt back in 2021, and it don't have the same vibe and whatnot, right? That's why I say, rewatch the first season and then jump into it and you'll understand the progression of it. It's like, just to wrap things up, it's like watching Dune Part 1 and then jumping into Dune Part 2. You see the progression and you appreciate 2 more because of what 1 set up, right? And that's exactly what the second season did here, right? Not perfect, right? But still, in terms of how they progress the story, I was thoroughly impressed by it. And yeah, I mean, we get a third season whether we like it or not. So I hope that we don't have to wait too long for that, right? But yeah, this second season was solid business, man. So for me, strong 4 to a very, very light 4.5 out of 5. But yeah, this really was well done, man, But I will say, right, unless you genuinely not too invested in the world of Squid Game, well, I should say if you're not too invested, you probably will watch this and be like, yeah, it was alright. But nah, if you're, again, just seeing one last time, rewatch the first one and then jump into it, though. That's where you really appreciate the progression of it, right? So yeah, it's a season that we didn't really ask for or expect, but we got it anyway, and I'm glad it's here because I thought that it followed up what we got the last season very, very well, in my opinion. And yeah, I really do hope that this third season is the last, because again, I really don't see the story going any further, right? But yeah, I mean, season 2 is a real deal, man. Definitely check this out, man.